Okay, Michael Taylor, here we are. Welcome to the Regenerative Journey.
Thanks, Charlie.
Welcome to the bit of grass on the sunny side of your studio, here just outside of Kentucky. Taylor's Run.
Taylor's Run. It's Taylor's Run's our wool brand, and I've taken that that name, but that Taylor's Run was actually coined when all the tailors were marketing their wool as one. But yeah, Terrible Vale is the original run. It was Terrible Vale Run, 1839.
Terrible Vale, and I noticed I drove out on Terrible Vale Road.
Yep.
So let's talk about that now then. So when did the Taylors get here?
1839.
Struth. So, because we want to talk about your story,
just
there's
the
a little bit of backstory there.
Yeah.
1839.
Yeah.
And did they name it Terrible Vale?
No, it was Terrible Valley. So I think they did actually change it they named it Terrible Vale, but I think it was Terrible Valley. And there's a few stories. I think Terrible Valley, first white explorers up here, colonisers, were probably visited on a cold July day and holy
Oh, terrible as in
Terrible Valley.
Terrible as in
maybe it was like 2019. It was a pretty dry year as well.
Yeah, but they stayed though.
Yeah, well,
couldn't have been that terrible.
No, the pastures up here were phenomenal, and that's why we, have the highest stocking rates in the country. Especially just south of here, south of Walker, the slightly higher rainfall. So yeah, my ancestors came out from Scotland, and I don't know exactly what they were doing. Their family they were traders, but William Tidd he'd been a solicitor. I think he'd studied law, but they came out to Port Macquarie originally, and there was some connection with Governor Macquarie, and they were living on a property there for a short while. It was only a very short while, less than a year, before they moved up here, and they bought this place off one of the squatters. So there'd only been white people colonising this area for only a few years, really, and yeah, so it grew from there. It was, I think, the original run was about 27,000 acres. So
How much are now? How much is
I've only got a bit over 1,800.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's about 12 or 13,000 in the family. So there's 6-7 families still.
Taylor families
Still here. Yeah.
Still here.
Can't get rid of them.
And within what sort of how close are they? Because I know your mum and dad's just over there.
Yeah, mum and dad just there.
They're within 100 metres.
I've got uncle, he's only 300 metres behind us. Got a cousin just out of sight behind the trees over there, another one just behind the trees over there. Wow. And he came in past Terrible Vale, so where the original homestead was a bark hut was. And then I've got cousins on the other side of Walker Road as well. So, wow. But a lot of the country was then acquired. Quite a bit of the country to the west of here was acquired for Kentucky. But
for
the settlement, yeah, it was a soldiers' settlement after the First World War, and yeah. But there's been tailors in this area for a little while. It's really not that long. We've actually been very lucky to be doing a bit of work with the Aboriginal elders locally, and it's been really interesting learning more about the history here. And the 2019 drought, because that was the worst drought our family had ever been through, that Aboriginal settlements relied a lot on water, and that highlighted where the extent of settlements would have been. And we actually went to a spot which is a bit special to the Taylors, and within half an hour being there, we were picking up full fragments and stuff. And we'd just never known. Like there's a little bit of recorded history of an Aboriginal settlement just a few kilometres from the homestead, but yeah, you know, it's been a long while since anyone's lived there.
And do you think that the vibe of that spot is, you know, the Indigenous, you know, people who are here for many years? They obviously, that was a spot of maybe significance for them if there were fragments there, or a camp or something.
Yeah, there was definitely a camp there. That it's sort of it was the last, the highest up the river that there was any water left.
Right.
You know, from there to the watershed, there was no permanent water. So, but yeah, I just like to think about that. It puts a lot of what we've done here to the land in perspective, and the damage we've done, and the good that we've done, and the things that have changed, and yeah, it's something we often reflect on.
Well, we'll get more to that. Just to put it into context, I've just not long turned up. We're sitting outside the studio. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's the first time I've done an interview with a hat and glasses on, because it actually is very bright out here. And I was welcomed with a cup of coffee and it's a hot cross bun.
It is.
And there's even some chocolate hiding around there too. So that in itself was just worth coming to. So if we get a bit of wind, I might have to just deal with that as it happens. It's just sort of just on the side of it now. I'm not getting too much of the wind noise. And if you hear chewing and slurping, then please excuse me. I might be a noisy slurper. It is.
It's morning tea time.
I know. Well, that was the plan. I've just been sitting at your front gate for an hour going, it's not smoko yet. So there's so much to talk about. Let's just get back to you, Michael. Your early years, your regenerative journey. What were you doing? Well, I mean, let's go back as far as you want to go.
Well,
where you were born here?
Well, yeah. Let's jump forward to. I was born here, born in Arnott.
You know what I'm going to do? So before you start, I'm going to take a shoe off and put a sock
over
on that thing.
You want me to put a sock over this one?
Actually, you know what? You won't want me to put one of mine on it.
Gee, lucky I put clean socks on this morning.
Oh, that's gold. Straight away.
Amazing.
Yeah. There you go.
It's a green sock.
I've taken. Sounds a little bit more muffled now, but I think it's okay. It might be the thickness of these socks. But that's better to have
winter socks.
Little muffled. Let's not get our microphones mixed up at any stage. Okay, start again, Michael, please.
Yeah. So I was born here. I've got two sisters, Rita and Catherine. We grew up here. We went to school in Kentucky, small school there, 30 to 50 students. Ever since it was started, it's 130 years old, I think, too. So it's been around. And we went to high school in Armadale. Survived school. I discovered the outdoors kayaking school. Talk more about that later. But I went off to uni. No, I actually had a year. I had a year on the farm first. I had my gap year, and I got into a few different uni courses, so I was still a bit unsure of what I was going to do.
Which uni did you end up going to?
I ended up going to RMIT in Melbourne.
Yeah, right.
Doing civil eng.
Weren't tempted to go up the road to Armadale?
No, the coffee's better in Melbourne. So
well, when I was at uni,
it was definitely better in Melbourne.
Oh, totally. Well, those years ago, there were no coffee shops. There were cafes, as we call them, cafes like Greasy Spoons, and there was a Chocolate Soldier and the IXL Cafe.
Ooh.
And they were pretty ordinary in the mall there.
Yeah.
They just so well. Look, they were adequate with the hangover.
Yeah.
So okay, good reason not to go to Armadale.
No, look, Armadale didn't offer industrial design or architecture or engineering, and I was interested in those building kind of things. I kind of of taken the land a little bit for granted, and you know, all the biology and ecology and everything that I could have learnt. I didn't feel it desperate to go out and learn a lot. I'd been exposed to a lot through my parents. I guess I grew up planting. You know, my parents have been planting trees here since the early '80s. So I was reasonably young. I was still in primary school, and we were dragged around every winter planting trees. And my parents had a contract tree planting business for a while. So you know, most of the old pines you see, not the old, but the '80s onwards pines that planted around the New England, a lot of them were planted by my parents. So I just grew up planting trees and being out in the bush. Dad's fairly adventurous. I mentioned before, he used to ride bikes and race bikes, and but we'd often, you know, we were always away camping or trips out to Central Australia or out in the Gorge country. Amazing national park just out to the east of here. Big area, bush, remote bush, and spend many days riding, hiking, climbing, scrambling through there. So if I hadn't been exposed to I was exposed to lots of different environments, and my grandparents on my mum's side, they out east of Gyra, and it's they've got a huge area of bush on their place, and I grew up in a family of gardeners as well. Gardens have always been a big part of my grandparents on both sides, and as you can see, there's 10 acres of garden around my parents' place there.
10 acres.
But
a bit of a veggie garden, is there?
Yeah, a bit of a veggie garden there, the quarter-acre veggie garden.
That's nice.
But
you just sneak down there every now and again and steal a bit from mum and dad?
Actually,
you've been known to do that.
Actually, after these days, the veggies just get dumped on the back door because
they're delivered.
Because there's an excess.
Uber Eats.
No, I get called in for some heavy lifting, but mum and dad are working on the veggie garden there. So I've grown up around growing things, and my parents did a lot of plant propagation. But I went off to uni and I did engineering, and I lived in Melbourne. I was down there for nearly 10 years.
So just on that, interesting that you, and maybe that's why you didn't quite have, well, I won't put words in your mouth, but you said that, I mean, you're living in a family of growers, plants, trees. That was normal for you to spend your winters planting trees. That's a very earthy, nature-focused kind of thing. And engineering was your passion.
Yeah, well, my dad was always,
which is sort of outside of that.
I guess they went hand in hand with a lot of the things we were doing. My dad built the first ever self-propelled tree planter.
Nice.
Everything that my parents, before that, mum and dad were selling.
No, it's all good.
It's not
as my guests get as my guests. It's got, as my guests get more relaxed, often I have to chase them with the microphone. So that's all good.
Yeah, so saying my parents were always looking for solutions to things, and sheep handling equipment was one of those things that my father started on. He was building sheep handlers before any of the sheep handlers you see these days existed, and selling those. He was at all the big egg field days selling those, and apparently there's still a few old J&V Taylor sheep handlers in museums probably, but that was, so the mechanical side of things was always there. My dad was racing bikes and building his own sidecars, because you couldn't buy motorbike sidecars, and I'll have to recount one story about my dad's engineering, because he and my uncle, my dad's brother, younger brother, he's younger. They used to do a lot of time trials together, and Dad was building the trials bike sidecars, and obviously trials bikes are light. They built light, and they built this. My dad built a very lightweight sidecar, and they went out and they were testing it, and it folded up, and
it
folded up on my uncle.
Oh.
So my
Where was this on
my
a
dad
road?
jumped off. He thought it was a great joke, but my uncle was there, folded in the sidecar.
Oh no!
So
where was
back to the drawing board?
Where
on
was
that one.
he? Was this on the road somewhere? On the highway?
No. This was hopping over rocks. So this is trials.
Oh, right.
Yeah, trials riding, and so but my mum and dad have been riding sidecars all over.
And
for many
you said
years,
that they're off today. They're off chuffing around.
They're off today, and a lot of people know my dad was importing the Ural sidecars into Australia. That was his retirement job.
Well, I saw Ural signposted somewhere.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. No, Urals. He's since sold that, but they're actually still based in Uralla, which is appropriate. Urals in Uralla.
Yeah.
But so the mechanical side was always my dad could have very easily been a mechanical engineer, and my mum's a lace maker, and you can't see, but there's plenty of lace, bobbin lace in there behind us, and that's just as complicated.
Yeah.
And so the mechanical stuff was always there. My mum actually went off to uni, started architecture, so the creative stuff, so I do a lot of photography as well, and but that's come from my mother's side. So there's all those elements were there, and but I did get out of engineering and come back to the farm, and so I was in Melbourne for about 10 years, and go back to the farm.
Did you work down there? So you uni for a number of years?
Yeah.
And you spent some time.
Yeah, I finished. I met my wife second year uni. That didn't take long, and
What took you here?
yeah,
What were you doing? I don't want to know. You doing first year.
I know, because my son's in first year uni at the moment. So
Wow.
I'm trying not to think about that.
No. What's he doing?
Hey, Remy.
What's he studying there? Or which uni?
He's doing aerospace systems engineering, which is, so my wife Millie, she did aerospace systems engineering. She came on exchange out from France, and when we moved back to the farm here, the shearers knew her. She was the rocket scientist.
That's a classic. Typical thing for a shearer to say. That's a classic. You're very funny.
But yeah, so look, I did actually, I worked in consulting for a while, but when we started having kids, I actually quit engineering and stayed at home with the kids, and that's when I took up photography full time, because that was sort of flexible, and I'd do that on the weekends, and Millie and I would often go out to events, and so
events being
horse events,
okay.
mountain biking. Mountain biking was always a big thing for us in Melbourne. Lots of bikes. Living in Melbourne.
So
lots of friends who were mountain biking.
So you'd get out of Melbourne on your go cruising around wherever. A lot of bikes actually in Melbourne.
Lots of bikes. It was early days. It was just taking off as a photographer. There weren't many photographers at events, and a lot of the events were way out the bush, so we sort of had it to ourselves, a few of us that were covering a lot of the events. These days you're going to elbow your way in fast.
Is that right?
Everybody's got a digital camera. Actually, there's so many phones. Phones are...
Well, here we are. We're
are.
on one right now. So, Michael, if I've been toying with the idea of getting a mountain bike, well, I don't even know if it's supposed to be a mountain bike that is, something with two wheels and pedals and chains and steering. I won't go into detail, but I'd love to talk to you off camera about how I might go, what might be appropriate, because it's one of those things. I know a lot of guys who got in, the most unlikely people to go cycling, and maybe cycling and mountain biking are different, but this the whole thing of getting on one of those machines, getting out, clearing the head, not sure about the Lycra yet. That might be.
You get used to
that might be. Well, from what my wife says,
your other persona.
Yeah, that's. It might be just the release I'm looking for. Well, from what my wife says about men walking around with their bike things, I think she'd love to see me and some.
There's a lot of farmers up New England here that are mountain bikers.
That's it.
Cyclists.
There must be something in that.
There's actually, I think, there's more and more, and now actually, it's funny, but I have been thinking the last couple of years that maybe the next bike on the farm won't be a combustion bike; it'll be an electric mountain bike because the performance they're getting out of it is phenomenal. And we don't have a huge property here. It's only 6 k's to the back fence, so.
But there's some pretty steep terrain, I imagine.
I've tried some of those mountain bikes, and the electric bikes, you can ride up stuff steeper than you can nearly walk up. It's phenomenal. So.
Actually, we've just been doing some homework on electric bikes, and they are much more like to replace a motorbike, and they're 2-wheel drive, and apparently they're only a couple of grand more than a sort of an equivalent, as you can even say. An equivalent.
Yeah, well, electric side by sides. We've just upgraded a couple of years ago to a side by side rather than the diesel, the quad bike. No, it's a petrol,
right.
petrol one.
Yeah.
But it's I think the potential for electric side by side, all-terrain vehicles like that.
It's just a super golf buggy, isn't it?
And to be and that's something I notice when I do go out on the mountain bike. It's so nice to be able to hear everything.
Yeah.
It makes it harder when you want to muster a paddock. The sheep can't hear you coming.
Unless you're checking lambing news, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you do hear, it's surprising what you do hear when you're just on the mountain bike. So, but yeah, Remy's actually working as a bike mechanic, so we can talk about that later too. But he's well and truly taken it up.
Well, I need something that sort of like can handle gravel, rough bitumen, not speedway type stuff.
Yeah, I need to be able to carry a chainsaw.
When you work out what you need to do to chainsaw to do some lopping.
Needs to have the capacity, yeah.
An electric chainsaw, I hope.
I'm not sure about carrying a sheep either. That'd be challenging on it.
You'll need to put a little.
I think the buggy is the way to
We
go.
digress. But I will hit you up for some advice on, I think, because it's something I've just been not avoiding, but just going, I don't know, it's too hard. Do I get a second-hand one? And because I borrowed a mate's one that was like 10 grand bike, and like rode it for 2K when if I break anything, I'm in big trouble. So back to the farm, events, photography, children.
Yep, children. When we started having children, that was the clincher. Millie's from Paris, slightly different to the farm. It was a bit,
How many years ago, just to put it all into?
97, we met, and so she'd just come over in exchange, but she does remember flying over Central Australia, looking down and going, I'm going to stay here. And
really? That's cool.
So her father actually spent time in Australia as a kid too. His father was in the government and worked as a diplomat or something out here in agriculture, which is weird. So she came over here. And, that's a story for another time too. But 18 months later we were married, and I'd been on exchange over in Sweden as well, she was out working. I was still finishing uni, and we started having kids, and that was like, we've got to get out of the city, and the space, and by that time Millie had enough time to adjust to the idea of moving out with a peasant sheep farmer. And,
so any earlier mightn't have been good. There was an adjustment.
Earlier on, there might have been harder. But, look, I can't thank my parents enough. They were a big attraction for me. But they've inspired myself and my sisters in so many ways too, and the choices were made. So I've got one sister that's back on the property as well. So she took one block, and which is about 8 k's to the east of here, and I'm on the home block here. I'm very lucky. My other sisters said, can we just save a little spot for her later on? She's an occupational therapist in Newcastle, but they're up here all the time, and her partner's keen bird photographer these days, so
Cool.
he's loving it here. We've got over 120 species of bird identified on the place. There's bird studies happening again at the moment. So.
Who does the study? Are you get uni in to do it, or do you guys do it?
The early studies were done by Nick Reed. He did a lot of the bird stuff here, I think. But the students, that was part of the Land, Water and Wool project back in 2002 or something. That started. AWI and Land, Water Australia, big project, huge amount of data collected right across the country. Our farm was one of the case study properties up here with Tim Wright and Rob Humphrey,
cool.
and the New England, the theme up here was biodiversity and wool-grown properties. Anyway,
and what were some of the results that sort of came out of that? I mean, what was some of the findings?
The highlights? Well, they well and truly, demonstrated that promoting biodiversity is quite possible on wool-growing properties, grazing properties, and there was lots of solutions. Like I said, there's a huge amount of publications came out of that project. Unfortunately, a lot of it sort of got archived, and we still keep a lot of it. And
you mentioned one the other day.
well, there's another project just started up now that carbon accounting and carbon and biodiversity is actually of an interest to the government and the market. There was actually a carbon sequestration study done on the property here in 1992.
Wow.
And if you'd asked people what carbon sequestration was then, they would give a very blank look, and it's a sort of science fiction or something. But yeah, we've still got that. That was actually done in some of the pine plantations, which is probably why it was hidden away. These pines, exotic.
What did they find?
Oh, it was a destructive. It was a full-on digging up the trees, measuring how much carbon was being sequestered in the root systems and in the soils and in the trees. They measured the whole lot, and they did it. I can't remember all the details, but I often just point out that, and that was actually a Southern Cross Uni thing. So it's funny that Southern Cross Uni are now leading the way in a lot of the soil testing and
So they it was a serious assessment.
yeah.
And what did they find? They thought that,
Like I said, I can't off the top of my head.
yeah, but it wasn't like a standout. Oh my God, we've got to plant more pine trees.
No, but
or maybe not an objective.
no, it wasn't. There wasn't they were purely looking at sequestered carbon and measuring carbon,
but not necessarily the change in.
No, they weren't looking at changes. No. They were, but it's a lot of that information now is being used in the carbon modelling, carbon accounting. So that was the hard data that they needed to establish trees of this size, of this age, this diameter, etc. Contain this much carbon.
More of a sort of a reference point.
That's right. So you were asking about the other project that's happening right now. That's AWI is collaborating with La Trobe University, and this has come out of a study done by Bushmark and that's Mark Gardner down the road, and Sue Ogilvie, she's from ANU, I think, and Rachel Lawrence up here. UNE and Danny O'Brien, and they were able to get 15 farms with grassy box woodlands, and they did extensive natural capital accounting on those properties. And one of the big things that came out of that was how much carbon is in the tree component of the ecosystems, and that's a really big thing for us because, well, you know, that the woody debris on the ground and the trees growing, that's carbon. It's in your face. It's not like soil carbon, which is out of sight, and you know, there's still a lot of research going into how much, how long, for, you know, etc. But so yeah, that's been really exciting, and this new project, they've got 50 properties across the I think mostly Eastern Australia, but they're obviously all wool growing properties, being an AWI. That's Australian Wool Innovation sponsored project. But yeah, again, so I think that they'll probably dig up a lot of the land, water and wool data, and I know that a lot of those properties, it's funny how it's the same properties. There's a lot of new properties there now as well, but yeah, there's quite a few people out there that have been doing these sort of things for a long time.
And not probably yelling from the rooftops about it. It's just gets done.
It just gets
hopefully
done.
The research or the results published and can be used. But as you say, quite often, depending on who's running those sort of things, you know, sometimes it's as much a box ticking exercise, and just, you know, it's just like, okay, I've spent my money. You know, not suggesting by any means what you've done here is, but you know, I just my experience with researchers is like, oh, cool, you know, I've got the funding, tick the box, it gets shelved, or you know, and then the job's done, or the results don't align with some, you know, paradigms
it's harsh, but there is a lot of, you know, there's been a lot of tree planting done over the years that has just ticked a box, and we've seen a lot of that across the tablelands. You see, you know, very fragmented little bits of tree planting here and there, but you know, my parents have well and truly exceeded that, and that's clear when you look. You know, you look on Google Earth, Google Maps, and there's a big green triangle in the middle of the tablelands, and that's it does stand out.
I just want to get back to that before we do, before we leave carbon, or sort of, are you looking at the soil carbon sort of market, that whole industry scenario, commodity?
Yes, and we haven't signed ourselves up to anything. We've had audits done and proposals put to us, but the idea of putting a covenant on, you know, areas of the property that are going to affect future generations, we decided against going down that path, and I've spoken to a lot of farmers too that are balked at that point. I think I'm going to have trouble articulating all this, but from what I've learnt and what I've been told by people that know me much better, you know, any carbon you're sequestering away is you know, potential that's not being accessed. So you do have to consider that. There is a possibility we could turn this into a, you know, massive carbon bank, just plant the whole thing, and but we're still going to be making more money out of grazing, and that, you know, if the carbon price changes and, you know, biodiversity credits change and the markets pick up like they have overseas, you know, that might be very different. But at this stage, we're trying to keep an open mind to it all, and trying not to tie ourselves down with, you know, something that's going to affect future generations.
So that, I guess, affecting future generations and covenants, that would apply more to like a conservation kind of covenant on biodiversity, like on a stand of trees
and agreements on how much soil carbon.
Soil carbon, yeah.
And so, there's a lot of people pretty positive about, pretty definite about how much carbon can be sequestered in soils. But look, there's a lot of very good soil scientists around just locally, and I haven't seen any convincing evidence yet that it's a quick buck.
Well, it could be a quick buck, but it could be, I guess...
And it could be a quick way to lose the money again, 20 years down the track. So I'd prefer to be putting that money, putting that into trees, and putting my time and look, there's a lot of the biodiversity and vegetation type proposals, carbon sequestration proposals, are also all native, and as you know, we're not all native here.
I'd say you're the majority of non-native, which I'm really pleased to see.
Look, we plant a lot of natives as well. This year's planting is 2/3 natives and 1/3 exotics. So we do plant a lot of natives as well, and we're at a point now where we're getting natural regeneration of our natives. So,
cool.
So that's really exciting. That's something we've just started to really notice in the last 10 years, 15 years.
You think that's due to, in those areas where it's regenerating, is that due to stock exclusion? Is it due to grazing management, or both? Or
bit of both. I think grazing management's probably been the main one. We've been able to, during my dad's time on the farm, did a lot of fencing up of the place. And I've done a lot of.
Going to chase you again there. He's getting very relaxed. This bloke. He'll be like horizontal. No. You sit however's comfortable. I'll chase you.
Backrest sag. Old chair. There we go.
The office chair's outside. That's handy. Don't know what to do out here.
Where was I?
You were. Where were we? We were.
The natives.
Oh yeah,
and natural regen.
Yes.
So, look, it's,
grazing.
I think probably more grazing. For a start, we might have said, it was, and a lot of people will still say it's because we're not spreading excessive amounts of fertilizer now, but we are spreading a lot of drip manure, and we are still getting regen in those areas. So I don't think it's input related. I think it's more to do with the grazing management, but it's been the grazing management in and around the two last droughts that we've had, which have been major germination points in history.
At the end of those dry periods.
At the end of those dry periods, or possibly even during, if the little showers have fallen at the right point. And look, there's still a lot being learned about native seed germination, and Fields in Fields and Bio Solutions in Uralla here have got a PhD student doing a lot of that there. Steve and Steve Fields and Dave Garra up in Darwin at the moment at a big conservation conference, and they've been presenting a lot of that information up there. Andrew Gardner spoke yesterday at our Silver Pasture webinar and touched on a lot of that, and there's still so much to be learnt. And quickly going back to the pines, a lot of people ask, why we planted pines. When we started, there was only mainly only pine nurseries. There was a lot of other exotics being propagated too, because they were easy, but pines were being propagated on a large scale. At that time, not many people were growing eucalypts or any natives. And the difference was 15 cents a seedling compared to $5-6 a seedling. And if you're putting in 20,000 trees a year, it's a big difference in price. So that's why we're planting pines. There was also the potential for timber, but initially it was for shelter and shade and shelter for the stock. There was New England dieback. It really hammered the tablelands. But now we know that it was the graziers that were hammering the tablelands, and nature was responding.
Do you think it was grazing? Do you think it's because I also hear the use of superphosphate? They just curl their toes up because that's just more phosphorus than they can handle. Is that another?
There's definitely I believe there are definitely species that do struggle with high phosphorus levels. Yes, but I don't know. Like I said, we're still seeing regeneration in paddocks that are getting inputs. So, maybe it was the excessive amounts of phosphorus. Look, I'm neutral on that one, but the point is we're getting the results that we wanted, and I think we're mainly getting that through grazing management, longer rest periods, and so.
What are you planting? You said sort of a third exotics, 2/3 natives. With the exotic portion of that, or any other year, what are some of your? I guess that you could have some favourite trees, and you can have some just trees that aren't necessarily your favourite, but you just didn't know they're doing a job. And then also, what job are you trying to get them to do?
Well, like I said, initially, shade and shelter was front foremost. Timber is now a thing. We've got a sawmill. We've been peeling logs for 10, 15, for 20 years now.
The Lucas mill, have you?
No, it's Mahoe mill, actually.
Is it really? Where from?
It's a Kiwi mill.
Yeah.
My father found that one through his research. He's always been very good with his research on these things. It's very similar in size to a Lucas mill, but it's got a twin blade. And we've found we can get a lot more production out of it in a day. So
you can just get through more logs.
You can. Well, when you've squared off the top of your log and you've squared off a side, then obviously every cut after that you're taking a board out each time on each row.
Yeah.
So and then you drop down and you square off the side, and then you're taking a board out. It's cable driven from one end. I'm using lots of hand actions here, but.
Yeah.
You can't.
Our listeners are very
can't hear
visual.
them. It's cable driven from one end, so it's very safe. You're not walking along next to the saw. There's a little gate brings the board back to you. So we got up to 8 cubic meters of rough sawn timber a day, and that's pretty good for a portable mill.
And what's the name of it?
Mahoe, MAHOE.
Cool, and
it's big turbo diesel engine.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry,
I'm fascinated. I haven't got one. I nearly bought one about 15 years ago because I was out there. No, it'd be bloody 20 years ago now. Because when I got back from uni, working in pubs, I would go and find freshly sawn native timber.
Yep.
Freshly fallen.
Yep.
And bash with the butt of the axe, bash the bark off,
yep.
Let it dry,
yep.
And then I sent some into town to Stonehaven Furniture to get milled.
Yep.
And some came back, some got lost in there somewhere, probably still there. So I've always had a real interest in it. So what sort of diameter can you put through it?
Whatever you can carry.
Really?
Yeah, it'll go up to.
It sits on the ground and sort of just.
Yeah, we've got a bench. We've got a bench that the logs sit in on.
Yeah.
So we chop them on that. So like I said, we call that your saw bench, and the saw runs up and back on a big triangular beam.
Yeah.
So it's a very stiff beam.
Do you take it out to the paddock where the timber is?
No, we actually, look, the 80s drought was a big one for my dad. That's when he started supplementary feeding, and that's when that was the last time they'd had really big dust storms from a drought. That was definitely a big changing point for my father and a lot of and my mother in the tree planting. Definitely prompted them to we're gonna change this. This is just not working. And like I said, what my dad had grown up with, being a lot more bush. Saying earlier that my grandmother used to walk walk my dad and his siblings to the bus. It's 2 k's to the bus down there, in the shade of trees the whole way, and you drive up our driveway, up through a couple of neighbouring properties, but you wouldn't do that now. You wouldn't have a chance. So what my dad had seen as a kid and grown up was in that very short time. That's yeah, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, there was just such a dramatic change in the landscape that anyway, so they got going on the tree planting. And I've got off track again.
No, that's all right. No, so yeah, no, 80s, dust storms, trees in the shade. How did those ones? What happened to those ones over that period of time from when your father was a boy walking to the bus? Like, did they just die from dieback? Did they end their lives? Because there's a lot of 2 k's of no shade now. Well, there's some shade. But
there was no. I think most of the clearing had stopped. There was still a hell of a lot of pushing up the dead wood on the ground and burning it, and that's something my dad and Mum realised that was, just. My dad thinks back to all the time he spent on the tractor pushing up wood and burning it, and just cannot believe. Thought he was doing the right thing, fighting up the paddocks, but yeah, just so much carbon just up in smoke. Could have been back in the soil. Could have been. I think they talk about often. One winter they were planting trees on the tablelands, the open plains between Arnott and Arnott. There's an area, and it was a very cold, windy winter's day, and there was a stand of dead stags. Every time they went past, they were planting trees, so it was good. But they noticed every time they went past this stand of a few dead stags, the drop in the wind was noticeable. And that was just from a few old dead trees. And it was enough, but it was just another of those little observations that you go, oh, actually, that dead trees. Yeah. And then again, I got some great photos very close to droughts. I'm talking the 13-14 drought and the 2019 drought. Great photos of stock standing in the shade of dead trees, and because that was the only shelter they had in paddocks. So that really, highlights the need for. And I think shade and shelter in terms of production. It's all the data's there now. People call me now and then going, I'm losing too many stock during winter. Lambs lambing, and I need shelter. And what do I do? Where do I go? So we do actually, we've got the Agri-Woodland network up here under the Landcare branch, and so a bunch of mentors that have done Rowan Reed's Master Tree Grower course and a mentoring course. So there is a network there now across the region that is helping people still, but it's still phenomenal that we went through that 2019 drought. I don't know whether anybody else noticed all the dust flying past, but it was very different here on the farm. Look, honestly, the pastures even here were very depleted. We still had close to 100% ground cover. It was all very dead, but we weren't getting the dust lifting. But if we didn't have the shelter of the trees, we would have had stuff blowing. So yes, you can't. Sometimes those droughts are so severe that the pastures will just dry out and die.
Blow away.
Look, the natives all hang in. I was just blown away by. We get our half a mil of rain. We'd be dancing around, jumping for joy, half a mil, and or a mil, a big downpour, 2 mil, and most people were, what's the point? It's just evaporating again. Yeah. But actually, if there's something there to grow, the grass grows, and the natives just I couldn't believe seeing green grass, growing when it was just so dry. And 220 mils for the year that year. This is normally a 700 mil rainfall.
Yeah, wow.
We know average doesn't exist.
It's only a reference. It's some sort of a reference, but
there was
average significant, definite. Yeah.
Average human has one breast and one testicle.
That's a Jim Garish thing.
I've heard that one. I love that one.
It is.
So yeah,
let's not be average.
That's right. So, but yeah, look, it was to see that extreme and see how the natives handled it.
Yeah.
It was, it's inspired me to plant a few more natives, keep planting a few more natives, but at the same time, some of our exotics handled that dry really well. We also saw a lot of exotics. I'm very partial to my oaks. My parents discovered the oak family, but yeah, they actually discovered it. No, they didn't discover it. They didn't
I was thinking, gee, they must be like 20,000 years old.
No, they didn't discover it, but they realised the oaks there was a lot more to the oak family than they'd originally seen in the few oaks that were kicking around in old gardens. There's a couple of 100-plus-year-old oaks. Actually, there's a row of elm trees down that you would have driven through. I used to say, those elms, they're nearly 100 years old. They're probably over 100 years. And then I only found out a couple of years ago that they're over 180 years old.
Get out of here.
And I had the privilege of milling up one that recently that was blown over in a storm, but there's still a pretty good grove down there. Those elms have lived a long while.
Yeah, big fan of elms too. So the one you milled, how was the timber?
Stunning. Elm is difficult in timber terms. It dries very unevenly.
Yeah.
So it needs to be well seasoned before we can use it. But I can assure you, all the tailors have said that yes, they want a bit.
So when you say, on that one, technical point, so when you say seasoned, are you saying
dried.
Seasoned, dried prior to milling or dried post milling?
Dried post milling, yeah. No, it needs to be, so generally if you quarter saw the more valuable timbers, they're not going to crack. You don't get the cracks as much. The radial shrinkage is greater than the tangential.
So that depends on the grain and a bit of a calculation or a bit of a thing to consider there about your cuts and then okay, good one.
So we the Mahoe's not ideal for it, but we can quite easily quarter saw a log. Back to oaks. Oaks are also a very long-lived family of trees. Oaks are the Quercus family is like the equivalent of our eucalypt family.
There's a lot there, isn't it?
Quercus are northern hemisphere only, but Quercus grow in, oaks grow in all sorts of climates, from high deserts to tropical areas. So there's a huge, there's 500-600 plus species and many hybrids in the oak family, similar to the eucalypts.
You gave me a bag of your hybrids a couple of years. Well, I gave you $10 or something for them.
Yeah, you said some of them even germinated.
Oh no, they definitely germinate. And I think, as I was saying the other day, I put them in April, which was only a month. Something. How long ago you gave me those things? Anyway, I'm pretty sure they're the ones that I put in April. They were out by May. Yeah. And they...
if they were out by May here, they'd be frosted.
Would they? Well, these ones were... They had little guards, like little bizzos on, cornflute things. Anyway, and as I was saying the other day, back in the summer, no, it might have been bloody January, February, they got flogged because the cattle got in there. Yeah. But they performed very well. So very many different varieties and hybrids. And
look, deciduous as well. So a lot of them, not all of them. There's a huge number of evergreen oaks too.
Do you plant them, evergreens?
Yeah, we plant. We've collected over 90 odd species of Quercus, and we know that there's about 75 definitely. The last count was the 75 that had survived for more than 10-15 years. and we've got we've got a lot now that are pushing 30, 40 years, and then there's the old ones in my grandparents' garden, and some of my cousins are in some of the older houses, and there's the very old oaks. So yeah, look, there was a potential for timber in the oaks too, but like I said, it's always been about diversity and trying things. It just happened that the oak family had a lot of diversity within it. They are very easy to propagate, as the acorns are a big live seed. It's really easy to see them. Even if I lose my eyesight, I should still be able to pick up an acorn. And yeah, they like I said, with the diversity, we've been able to try lots of different ones and finding the ones that survive quite well here. And timber, the potential, again, as in the eucalypts, there's a lot of valuable timber species, and in the oaks as well. So my parents walk around the property now just totally blown away by the fact that they're looking at acorns that they planted, oaks that they planted, and they're already pushing 30, 40 centimetres in diameter, and that's only in 35, 40 years. It's just they're not, I say that because a lot of people think oaks, they think slow growing. Oaks are often seen as slow growing because they spend a lot of time establishing their root systems. It's a 5-to-1 ratio, I'm told, five below the ground to 1 above, which is hard to believe when you see the size of some of the oaks. But yeah, so that's a huge amount of root system below the ground, and funny enough, roots are made out of carbon.
Something
too.
called carbon. What do you see them, oaks specifically, or generally, general exotic trees, contributing to the landscape?
Well, again, we live in such a modified landscape, don't we? We haven't necessarily gone out to damage the landscape, but in some cases we have, and but we live in a landscape where we're running exotic animals, sheep, cattle, chickens, and growing exotic crops, wheat, oats, etc., etc.
I guess we're exotic here too, aren't we?
We're pretty exotic here too, and like I said, we've...
I mean, you have a French wife, so she's even more
exotic.
Contributing to the exoticness,
hybrid vigour.
The exoticnisation of the landscape.
So look, yeah, it's I think in agricultural landscapes that you're dreaming a little bit if you think you can get back to what was there before. Now we're facing climate change, and now, as Nick Reed presented yesterday, all the modelling showing that how regions are going to change and potentially wipe out native species that are very adapted to some areas. Other species will adapt and move, but in the meantime we have to be thinking diversity and climate resilience and just seasonal resilience. I mean, like I said, I've been through 2 droughts now. That the first one, 13-14, was it's it hasn't been this bad. It's never been this bad. That waterhole hasn't dried up since '64, and it's probably worse than the Centenary Federation drought, etc., etc. And then we got through that, and we're like, right, ready. We can handle this. And I said, never again hand feeding. I don't want to do that. So I've been concentrating on the pastures and getting that right, getting the nutrition in there, and managing them better, and at the same time, observing how the weeds have come in and managing those too, and then everybody's seen the same coming out, and then 2019 arrived. Wow.
yeah. Forget 2013.
So yeah, and I'm sure plenty of people heard farmers go, the pandemic was nothing. 2019, on the other hand, water's
challenging. Water
is pretty essential to life, and when you're on 1,800 acres and you haven't got a drop of water, it starts to get pretty scary. So yeah,
So the trees in that scenario were sort of had a function.
They had a huge function. But they were my fallback. I knew already that if I'd had to sell my stock or reduce my stock, I had an on-farm business in the timber already. Look, we don't do a whole lot of milling at the moment. We do custom orders and that sort of thing, but the profits we're making aren't like what we're making out of the chicken cattle. So that's just how it is. We're not in a big forestry area. We're very very remote here. Southeast Queensland and all the way out on the eastern slopes. My nearest timber industries, and they're quite a long way, and the biggest markets are still Brisbane, Sydney. So when we were selling a lot of timber, we were, the Brisbane markets were taking as much as they could get. That was great. It was good to know. And now the news, the forestry industry is facing a massive deficit of softwood, and there's a huge amount lost in the fires. They reckon the next 15 years is going to be very interesting. So who knows? Maybe the timber will be worth a bit more if we have another drought in the meantime. The next drought will be just around the corner. We know that now. But yeah, having those trees there, being able to go into a forest and stand in ankle deep green microlina was pretty special.
In the drought under those trees. In a pine forest, mind you.
Yeah, okay.
In a pine forest, and look, I've got plenty of photos of that. It was amazing and huge relief. And again, like I said, the dust, we just weren't getting the dust lifting off the ground here. We weren't getting. It only takes 5-10 k's to drop that wind speed and makes a hell of a difference. The bird life here was phenomenal. I think a lot of birds were moving in.
Like kangaroos.
And yeah, look, my dad grew up. It was a novelty for him to see kangaroos, and now we're a little bit overrun by kangaroos, wallabies. We do have a roo harvester coming in regularly and harvesting roos. Roos, wallabies, wallaroos. But it's great. It's really nice to see those things too, and we seem to be living along with them.
What about nutrient cycling? Do you get a sense of what those deciduous trees are doing as a nutrient sink or not?
Yeah, look, I think we've seen areas of pretty average pasture planted out to trees, because they were areas that we could afford to say, well, let's plant this down to trees. And now you go into those areas and the amount of litter on the ground and the colour of the soil, and we just had ZNet and Urala here have been doing biodiversity and soil study on properties around the place. ZNet's the zero net emissions for Urala, and they've been extending their reach out onto properties. And we had some soil tests done on the Tree Fest site, which was Tree Fest was a little field day we hosted here, and my parents dreamt up.
Tree Fest, cool.
In '92, and we had it actually grew into something so big. It was just around the time of formation land care, and they were looking for projects, and so this little field day, they thought they'd run this little field day on tree planting technique and propagation, etc. And they ended up postponing it a year, not because of a pandemic, but because it was growing into something much bigger. There was a real thirst for information, and so it turned into this big day. They had a big day, lots of demonstrations, 10 hectares all planted down to trees in demonstrations that day, lots of different planting seed, direct seeders and planters, a few different planting machines that my dad had designed and built. But we had just under 100 exhibitors from all over the country. They ran a big marquee. They had speakers all day. So the head of Waycare Australia was here, and they had all the pulleys. At lunchtime, they'd counted 6,000 people through the gate. And this is in 92.
92. Yeah, 6,000 people through the gate.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and they and
That was
it
here?
and it was it was here. It was here,
6,000.
and it was another 2 k's up, out on the farm. So they had a fair way to drive in, and it wasn't even a Facebook event. Actually, internet didn't exist.
No,
92. So
have you done it since?
we had a 20-year reunion event here when we planted Sarah Schmuder and guys in Arndale, Beck Smith had an event called Frog Dreaming. They were running for kids, and they were looking for a new location, and known Sarah for a while, and she wanted. So we got the opportunity to host that. We ended up hosting Frog Dreaming for 4 years, and but the first year of that was coincided with the 20-year anniversary at Tree Fest. So I had a crazy idea. I always wanted to plant something that could be seen. Google Earth was a thing then, and Google. So you were starting to see aerial maps, and thought it wouldn't be cool to have big tree planting. And like I said, our place already stood out this big green triangle, but wouldn't it be cool to have a writing or a big shape or something? So we came up with the idea of a big forest in the shape of a frog. And yeah, you can zoom in on the property now, see a big forest in the shape of a frog. But all the kids got involved in that, and they planted a few trees. We limited them to just a few trees each, because spend a lot of time replanting trees that have been put in upside down on their side, or half in, or
I've had some experience.
But it's something now. I'm hoping the kids that were involved in that look back now and they zoom in on their smartphone, and they can see the frog that they planted. But we had a lot of people get together. Some of the old exhibitors, Dave Curtis came and from he does a lot of theatre and writing and arts in eco and conservation stuff. So he's worked a lot with Dave Carr as well. And so he came, and we planted a big frog. So we did have it, but it was nothing like, we only had a few hundred people for that.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll ever see another 6,000 people field day.
That's enormous.
The internet has changed the way we access information.
Well, yeah,
so
I guess so.
So much.
Don't have to go to a field day to get any stuff.
You just listen to Charlie's podcasts.
That's it. And once we put yours up there, it's you'll never see anyone here ever again. I know it already.
Thank goodness.
But having said that, though, I'd love to know if you do ever do something like that again, because that'd be fantastic. And not and given I haven't, and probably won't have time to look around today. Love to come back, and I'm not priming up for the end of the show either. The thing, we got a little bit to go if you got the time.
Another coffee?
No, you know what I did this morning though? I interviewed Stu Austin, and for the first time in any interview I've ever done, I had to go and drain the spuds halfway through. I said, mate, you just sit here and I'll cut this bit out.
Stuart twiddling his thumb.
He was. Yeah, I could hear him clicking away there, probably checking emails or something.
Yeah, we had Stuart here a couple of years ago, and that was great. It was. I apologise. I'm always a little bit sceptical about about some things, but Stuart actually really made my dad's ears prick up. And
in regard to, what was he talking about?
Yeah, in regard to water. Water, actually, we didn't have any water at that point. The creek had been dry for a good year already, and so Stuart, I can't remember. I think Stuart was he was observant enough to know which way the creek flowed. But at that point, we did have a lot of people seeing the creek and going, so which way does this creek flow? But yeah, Stuart actually, and some of the natural sequence farming ideas. A lot of the observation stuff, yes, there were things that my dad had definitely seen, but it gave us the confidence to start actually fiddling a little bit more with some of the areas that had suffered from erosion due to the overdevelopment previously, and our creek line was quite eroded and scarred deep. So already, you know, our creek's been fenced up for over 25 years now, I'd say. So we've got, you know, big forests along our creek, very well protected riparian zone, but still the scars of what had been there previously. So we're now feeling a little bit more, looking at where the water flows and trying to slow it down a little bit more, because we think some of the creek flats probably have not holding water that they could. I had in the 2014 drought. I had a big water hole, quite a big water hole, a good 300 meters long, metre 2 deep, metre and a half deep probably, which is not so deep, but that was my backup plan when the dam, a few hundred meters up the creek, when that dam dried up. That was my backup plan, was that water hole in the creek. The dam dried up, but the creek had been dry probably for a few months before that, and so that backup plan was it wasn't there, but we are now looking at the way our riparian zones possibly could hold more water. We don't have bores on the place here, and we don't, we're on the top of the range here, so the only place water's going to come from is from here.
It's from upstairs.
So from up above us. But so yeah, holding more water in the landscape is now our current little side projects.
And with the intentional use of natural sequence farming strategies?
Not exactly. Yeah. No, just some of the observations. Look, we still believe up here. It was Ron Watkins, WA. He was one of the very early adopters of the yeoman's ideas, contour lines and plantings, and Ron Watkins is very well known over it. Ron Watkins actually spoke at Tree Fest in '92, came all the way from WA to speak, and but you don't hear a whole lot about him these days. But yeah, he was well ahead of. Look, we did actually, and Ron spent a lot of time here on that. They looked at putting in contour banks, but decided our soils are not exactly suited to contour banks, structure, and in the end, ground cover I think is trumped, and all of that, and plus it's not a bump that we need to trip over on. So riding through the paddock, I know the contour banks are very small, and subtle.
I would challenge you, Michael, it's not a challenge. It's just we did and I'm thinking I was very similar, and this is not this is just had been my experience.
Yeah.
Looked and read the books and Peter Andrews stuff and thought, mechanical stuff, dozers or excavators and mechanical stuff and diesel and whatever else. Anyway, I sat on that for years, and then for whatever reason thought, I need to look at this a bit more, and I just sort of got a bit curious about it. And then we ran a natural sequence farming course at Anamino back in February with Stuart Andrews and Tarn Park Training.
Yep.
Peter was there for a day. And I'll tell you what, I was really surprised at how much it changed my view in 4 days of the lens through which I look at the landscape and my appreciation of the hydrology and water flow.
Definitely.
It was a really interesting sort of paradigm. Not that I had a huge paradigm about it or against it. It was just it sort of restructured my thinking in a really positive way.
That's right. No, definitely. Look, Stuart was only here for a day, and I haven't met Peter, but I think it's awesome, the stuff that they're doing, but a lot of the observational stuff that comes with what they're doing is the biggest part. I think a lot of farmers would recognise that good observation skills. That would be, we have a lot of people come through here and ask, so what's the number one skill as a farmer? It's just observation, actually. So, if you're good at observing how things work and what's happening, and whether it's your stock health or whether it's the pasture health or water or the climate. You get to know when the rain's coming and when there's going to be frost, and so
It's free too, isn't it?
it's free.
Open your eyes. Just on that observational stuff, just going back to a question that was in my head a little earlier, and the drought and the more, I guess maybe more the natives because they're native as opposed to exotics. When do you see the trees behave in a certain way before or after rain? I guess there might be some activity, but do you see them being preemptive about rainfall
yes.
events or
Yes,
wet and dry?
yeah, we definitely do, and like in a season, like we've just had some of the oaks anyway, not all of them, but some of them, the acorns are germinating on the trees, and
Fair
and
dinkum.
they're like, hang on, we're not in winter yet, guys. Haven't even fallen off the tree, but they're germinating. I don't know whether that's, I don't know. I wouldn't.
And when you
I
say
would say there's definitely some preemptive stuff, but there's definitely reactionary stuff as well, and observing those reactions. Preemptive. It's harder to spot the preemptive stuff. I think I know a lot of the plants that get quite confused. We'll have a hot spell and everything comes. That they must be confused because they've all shot. Yeah, there's shoots everywhere. There's flowers and then wham, another -5 frost.
did you get that this autumn? Has that happened this autumn?
We've definitely a lot of the oaks, a lot of the trees, full stop, all types, even some of the ukes were frosted off. We had some -5s here very early, and it was unusual to see a lot of the deciduous exotics that normally colouring up beautifully, and they've actually just been frosted before they even coloured up.
Because they had a bit of fresh shoot
Well,
about
they were
them
still a bit
and
green.
cooked.
They was just still green.
Yeah, right.
So I won't go as far as thinking plants are well ahead of it. I think there's a more reactive stuff. I'm not the expert on that, but again, it's still seeing how they react to different seasons, and definitely the again the deciduous species are capable of dropping all their leaves, and in 2019, by February, January, February, with a lot of the exotics were already, the deciduous ones were colouring up, dropping their leaves, or just dropping their leaves.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, it's bloody dry.
Yeah.
I'm shutting down. I'm going into hibernation early.
And thank God they do. Otherwise they'd be there trying to sustain themselves and pump water and all go to the shit.
Yep.
Tell me about the silvo pasture stuff you've been doing. You're doing some websites every once a week at the moment?
No, but the Silver Pasture webinar grew out of wanting to run it was very raw coming out of 2019, and I was hoping to be able to get a bit more in place here very early on, and because the differences were quite stark. So we wanted a field day, we wanted an on-farm field day, and I wanted to talk and show and have other people show all the stuff we're doing with trees, whether it's just from the planting to the harvesting and maintenance, and people do forget that there's a lot of maintenance that gets left out with trees. I mean, they can be just left to their own devices, but you expect nature to take its course in dealing with that maintenance, and we've seen that with all the trees that have died out, thinned out in the natives as well. Some of the areas that had resprouted, with lots of regrowth, and then but Mother Nature's still managed to thin those out, and people are freaking out because there's all these dead trees.
And gums, I know we had a lot of wattles that turned up their toes in that summer. Were gums as well?
Oh, a whole range. whole range. And look, I'm not too worried. I think what's going to survive is going to survive. So the Silver Pasture Field Day was originally an on-farm demo day. Due to COVID, we postponed that a year, and the season's just got better and better. So it's the starkness isn't quite there, but there was still plenty to talk about. And now we're seeing the the mice plague, and we're seeing all the birds on the place here doing their bit, and the snake. I'm sure that the few snakes we have seen have been very fat. So,
are you seeing much mice activity? I don't know, in the paddock or in the house?
Yes.
Houses?
Yeah, I don't know whether you noticed on all the doors here. Keep the door closed.
Okay, right.
So but we've had our fair share of mice. We're not keeping them all supported. But yeah, we're seeing the ecosystem services kick in, and the birds doing the animals doing their job.
It's an interesting term, isn't it? Ecosystem services. It's not about being comfortable. I've always wondered, what's your definition of ecosystem services?
It's all those shade, shelter, interactions. The ecosystem, from the microorganisms through to your quolls and your birds and etc. Large mammals that are supported that bring stuff to the rest of your. In the case of a grazing property, whether it's spreading seed, a lot of the native seed that gets spread.
I guess it's a
shade and shelter is still that's your number one.
I guess they use the word services. It's almost like it's a service. I just think it's an interesting word to use. It's a very common phrase, absolutely, and it's not being critical of it. It's just interesting. The word ecosystem services, which is always sort of made me think about.
I don't know who coined it. But
I mean, it's almost feels like that it is serving us.
Yes.
And which is, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable about that.
It's a free service.
It is. Oh no, it's absolutely free. But I mean, I guess I get to what's our contribution to that to this? Is it reciprocated?
It's a respect. Of those. And it's continuing to maintain those ecosystems.
No, use the word services. Come on, don't be shy now. No, I'm glad it's come up because I've always.
We could talk about regenerative ag too.
Yeah, we could.
That's a pretty new term.
It's new and it's very broad, and
very broad.
And then everyone's got their own definition, which is good. I think.
Yeah,
it's about being comfortable.
It is broad.
And really, ecosystem services as a concept is, dovetailed with regenerative ag, whatever that definition is too. It's all the same stuff, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. And look, Silver Pasture is another one.
Now tell us about that.
Why did you choose Silver Pasture? Isn't that just agroforestry?
Well, that's right. You tell me. I mean, here's another one: agroecology.
Some tropic forestry.
That's it.
Oh God, there's so many.
I was talking to Tammy Jonas.
Permaculture.
Who?
Permaculture.
Yeah,
that's another one.
No, they've got to be separate. No, we have to be in the church of this or that. No, it was interesting talking to Tammy Jonas down at Victoria the other day, and she was very. It was a great conversation. I think we have probably more chats off air, but interesting conversation around the use of the word. So the term regenerative agriculture, in her view, and I'm not being critical anymore. It was a really good chat.
Yeah.
And I had the first time I'd really sort of had thought about it, and she was saying regenerative ag as a phrase or as a concept to her is very different from agroecology. They are advocates of and proponents of agroecology, not regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It wasn't.
Well, there's land care as well.
Yeah.
And there's sustainable farming, and there's
conservation farming.
Ecological farming. That's a big one in Europe, obviously. Biological farming.
Yeah, biologique.
Bio.
How's your French?
C'est pas mal. No, I won't. No, I better not.
Is it good? Is it good?
I get by. I can get
Do you?
by.
So if you were dropped in Paris, you could order croissant.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Pas de
Oh,
problème.
just on that one.
Croissant, s'il vous plaît.
Oh, sure, she's showing off now. Now, well, I don't know. I think someone was just trying to make me look silly, but someone said years ago, if you want to sort of sound more French, purse your lips more. Bonjour. I'm not sure if it works, and just makes you look silly. But when I was over there many years ago, it was segueing a little bit, but why not? In France, that's right. And I was cruising around, and someone gave me the best tip ever, and they said, don't ever go into somewhere and ask someone if they speak English.
No.
Say,
speak really bad French first.
Well, yes, we'll say parlez-vous Australian, and then they go, most of them. Sometimes they just thought dill and just ignored you, but most of the time they go, oui, oui. You know, they would. Not saying you were English was a really good thing.
Yeah, my dad relied on the wallabies, actually.
Oh, did he put wallaby jersey on or something?
Yeah, or he said, wallabies.
Boing boing, kangaroo,
football, rugby. Rugby, sorry, can't say football.
With his lips pursed. Rugby.
The wallabies got my parents everywhere in France.
That's gold. I should make sure I take over my... Actually, I've got a wallaby jersey, as in like a souvenir one. The Burra Goldies have a green and gold jersey, so I reckon I'd probably get away with it. They'd probably reckon I was a wallaby.
Yeah.
I've got another football story, but I won't tell you now. Why did we get on the French? Biology. So I haven't sounded French then. It's interesting that the use of language and the sort of demarcation or the terminologies can be
misguiding.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, it is. Might not understanding. Blinkering, yeah. It's like, oh no, I don't use that word. I use this, so that's fine, absolutely. I just find it interesting that that is the thing that there's and you've got people who love permaculture and they are in the school, and there are people who go, oh my god, like.
Yeah.
That's you don't do. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It sort of can be.
Well, silver pasture's not. It's kind of a newish term. It's not widespread. Plenty of people have no idea what it means. So, but it has the word pasture in there.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that it would highlight to graziers that
it was
this form of agroforestry, it is we're recognising pastures as a major part of agroforestry.
Did you make it up? You coined the term?
No.
Or if you had it, yeah.
I discovered it. No.
Who? Like your mum and dad discovered it.
That's right.
My God, the Taylor family is so talented. They're explorers.
No.
So where did it come from?
I have no idea. It's been around forever.
Okay.
Look, I haven't got his name here. There is an American author that's just published a book called Silver Pasture.
Yeah.
And it does cover it pretty well, but it's just another form of agroforestry.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the investment schemes back in the early 2000s that used agroforestry, but it was essentially just monocrop forestry.
Yeah.
They were purchasing farms and putting trees on, and then with the collapse of a lot of those managed investment schemes, and because it was very poorly done forestry, even as forestry, it wasn't even agroforestry, but that I think that really soured the term forestry for a lot of people, and it didn't matter whether it was agroforestry or I still have to correct that every time I type it in Microsoft Word. There's they doesn't recognise agroforestry.
Does it try and turn into agro something?
Something. It's
yeah, right.
So agroforestry is still not fully understood. People still see it, forestry as they see that part of the word, and they miss the, even agriculture. People miss the culture part.
Yeah, good call.
And so there's and like I said, our local tree mentoring group of people it's the Agri Woodlands Network. It's not the Agri Forestry Network, because a lot of people recognise the open woodlands of the tablelands, and that's easier for them to understand. So yeah, there's a lot in. So anyway, that's why we use silvopasture.
And what is
all
it?
the resources on there on our, so we've got silvopasture.com.au.
Oh, okay, nice.
We're hoping to bring together a lot of resources of trees on farms and agroforestry. There's stuff that Australian Agroforestry Foundation push what Rowan Reid talked about, but also a lot of the ecosystem services stuff that Nick Reid talked about, and the biodiversity side of things, whether it's the seed collecting, and all the timber side of things, and or it's cut plants, all those things that relate to trees and farms and or woody plants on farms.
And truly,
that provide those extra 2 strata layers that pastures are missing. I watched a very good documentary called Guardians of the Grasslands.
Oh yeah.
On the ranchers that manage the grasslands of the central Canada, southern Saskatchewan, and it was a great little documentary, very emotional, talking about the loss of the bison out of those grasslands, and
we'll put that in the show links.
How cattle are now taking that place in terms of promoting actually the diversity of the pastures. But I don't know. I still really struggle looking at those really bare landscapes and looking actually where the trees, can still have a place in those areas, because we're still talking people and animals that require shelter, and all the Nick Reid again in his presentation yesterday put up some very very comprehensive data on the value. When you incorporate trees in a pasture system, the production and the profit you're making out of pasture drops, but the overall value of the system goes up. Yeah.
So a lot of people sort of
there's a little bit of a compromise between having the two systems together, but the overall value is greater than
1 + 1 = 3. So where can people? Do you want more people on the webinar? As in,
look, we're done now.
Oh no, okay.
We just had 2 that replaced.
Oh, how rude! How about you do some more for our listeners?
Look, it was a starting point for Southern Rural Landcare. We hadn't run any. They hadn't hosted any webinars. Yeah. A lot of us were newbies on Zoom and presenting live from in the field. That was a challenge.
You said you're in the paddock.
I was actually out in the paddock
on your phone
because I was desperately wanting to get people out there in the forest.
Yeah.
And that it's never the same just on a screen. But if I tripped over and landed on my face, it would have been real. It would have all been live. And
you'd broken it
well and truly demonstrated the amount of woody.
The danger in the forest.
The woody debris under my feet.
Now, talking about forests and trees, we can't have a conversation without talking about Rowan Reid, can we?
No. It's actually, Rowan. Our connection with Rowan does go back a long way as well, which is funny because when he was up here about 6 years ago running the Master Tree Growers courses, he actually had a big project at the time. He got from Innovation in Farming. He wanted to run a pilot of his agroforestry mentoring networks. Obviously, in the old days, agroforestry is a very vibrant industry down there. Very good country for growing trees. They're close to markets, etc. But they've struggled to, again, there's no support for extension work there's very little support for extension work in forestry, so they've been relying on the network. At the time when we found out about this pilot project, Southern New England Landcare up here too were very, very squeezed for funds to keep our extension people going, which are the lifeblood of the network. organising get-togethers, etc. It just takes, you need those people to organise those things sometimes. And so I was on the board of SNELC, and we were looking for, ideas that we could keep the organisation going, and we came across the agroforestry mentoring network, Peer Group Mentors, and we thought that sounded like a great way of ensuring that we didn't lose all the knowledge that we had, because if SNELC had closed up their doors, there would have been a huge amount of knowledge lost. So we worked with Rowan on that project, and when Rowan came up to Pasture Tree, of course, it's up here, he was on a farm. You've been here before? And Rowan was like, nope, never been here before. Don't remember that. Anyway, the next day my mother brought a photo out of Rowan Reed on his farm, lecturing on trees.
No way.
The property
It
had
looks so
changed.
different.
The property had changed so much that he was absolutely sure he'd never seen the place.
Wow, that's cool, isn't it?
So,
And he'd be pretty astute to the fellow too.
That was funny, but yeah. So that agri woodland network we have now, we've got about 15 mentors, and that have the knowledge, have been on a lot of the properties that we've been mentoring on now. So they also have knowledge of those properties as well. But that's all. We're basically sleeping agents. There's no office or car or mobile phone to keep us employed. But we're all local farmers and academics and etc. that are involved in that, nurserymen and orchardists and a wide range.
And you're servicing the New England? Is that sort of your membership of your zone?
Yeah, a lot of New England. We've gone as far as Tamworth and up to Glen and out down to Moundock, and so all over the place. Part of for those that don't know, part of the mentoring process is normally if you employ an agronomist or a land care extension officer or someone to come and advise you, it's often just one person, and they might be brilliant, but it's still just one person, and it's, there's potentially a biased view there. So part of the the mentoring process we have is there's a minimum of 3 people go out to any one client, so you never get a single view, and it's mentoring. It's not consulting. So we're listening to the ideas of the landholders and what they want to do. So it's putting the power again back in the land, which is what land care was originally, and but it's a different beast these days, and so is the funding environment. It's a very different beast.
It's all about adapting to the new funding environment, isn't it? Keeping your finger on the pulse with where funding's coming from, and
yes,
be lessons of it too.
And we're aware of that because obviously exotics have never been really covered under any of the tree planting programs. So
not really recognised.
No, which is why my parents became very good and passed those skills on to me too. Establishing trees as cheaply as possible. So it's not not breaking the bank. No. To go out and plant 250,000 trees tomorrow would there wouldn't be many people around that could afford to do that.
So you've got the facilities and nursery sort of set up, and
no, we rely on external nurseries.
Okay.
Obviously the acorns and some of the other direct seeding we're doing. That's the seed that we're harvesting on farm now. We propagate some trees ourselves. There's particular special ones but there's a couple other local nurseries, Kentucky Tree Nursery, Armdale Tree Group. They all do propagation, and they'll propagate whatever you want.
Do you go sneaking around botanic gardens and getting acorns and elm seeds and all sorts of stuff?
Maybe, yes. Is it
I don't think. No, well, we're both in trouble, and if it is, because I do a very similar thing, and
we haven't found the Wallamay pine yet.
You haven't found it, no. Have you got?
No.
Could you grow one here? Probably.
Probably, maybe. I don't know. It might be a bit good for it.
I tried it, but I think our soil's a bit acid.
We're sitting next to the tree up behind you on the left there.
Oh.
I don't know whether you recognise what that is.
No. Are you going to test me? No.
Think of the biggest tree in the world.
Oh, the redwood.
Yeah, that's a California redwood. That's a sequoia.
Sequoia. You know, it's interesting you say that because I was talking to. I had the pleasure of meeting. I'm going to get his surname wrong. Pape, Scott Pape. You know, the barefoot investor. He's
Yes,
in Victoria.
Yep.
And he down there doing a workshop and biodynamic workshop, and he wasn't at the workshop, unfortunately, but I'll get him to another one. And he was saying he had, I think the next day was a Saturday or something, he was planting maple redwoods on his farm, and it's sort of near, I'm going to get it right, sort of east of Daylesford, so
Yep.
sort of colder, but probably not dissimilar to here in terms of the cold and the,
No,
probably gets warmer over
they
here.
do have some. We did actually try some redwoods out on the farm. Failed dismally.
You mean out in the paddock?
Yes, yeah, big planting.
And why? What was it? What was it? Too hot?
But it was too hot, too dry, too cold, too wet.
Okay.
No,
Right.
it wasn't too wet. It was just before the 2013-14 drought, and we lost a lot of trees we planted in that planting, and it was the first time I'd ever watered trees twice. Being again, part of planting trees economically is picking the time to plant, as croppers would know.
When do you plant trees?
Normally we're a spring planting, but I'm sowing acorns. I've planted 400 acorns the other day, and because we just had some rain, and I couldn't do anything else, so we had the ground prepared. So we went out in the rain and raincoats and planted trees.
How do you prepare the site for acorns?
They need a fairly good seed bed. So most of our tree plantings are double rip and a mound or a rotary hoe, and sometimes we'll be spraying out either before or sometimes after. So again, picking our times to be able to make that germination or starting with seedlings as best as possible. So
you always put the acorns in just as a ungerminated acorn, or do you?
Some of the acorns. Bill Funk is someone that we've drawn a lot of knowledge on oaks.
Who's that?
Bill Funk.
Bill Funk.
Bill Funk. We have the biggest collection of oaks in the country.
Where's Bill?
He's just south of the Grasslands. When I was living in Melbourne, I visited him a number of times. He's got an amazing property. His son Robert is taken over these days, but Bill's still propagating.
Bobby Funk. That's cool. Billy Funk and Bobby Funk. That's cool.
But Bill's been phenomenal in educating us on oaks, and we ran an oak field day here a few years back. Had a lot of interest actually.
Yes. Can you do another one, please?
Maybe. Now that we've had some rain and green grass, it might be a bit more pleasant. But look, we learned a lot about some of the red oaks and some of the oaks out of Mexico are in fire-prone areas, and the acorns are developed with husk. In our wetter soils here, sometimes those acorns were rotten, and we didn't realise. So we're either dehusking them and planting them, or dehusking them and growing them out in micro trays for a start.
Wow.
To get them going. But it's there's a lot. I am, like I said, I'm propagating a lot as well, putting it in. But so
unreal.
And we're actually covering them with sawdust out of our sawmill, so to just keep the soil moist.
That's a little
over winter, and it's a nice little bit of organic weed mat. But we've found that coming out of the end of winter, a lot of the oaks have their roots down 10, 15, 20 centimetres already.
If you plant them now,
if we plant them now,
it's unreal, isn't
and
it? They get them through the spring and the
they
summer.
get it, yeah, that's before they even have a top on them. So it's quite impressive digging them up at the end of winter and seeing how long those roots are. And to think, a lot that we planted this year were ones that had already germinated on the tree, so they're already a couple of centimetres long.
There we go. I've never heard of that. I'm just conscious of the time, Michael, and one question that I probably should have put to you earlier, now it's good time, anyway, were there any, in your journey, were there any sort of points in time that you recall were life-changing? Big catalytic moments?
Yeah, so many points. The bigger ones have been more recent. I guess coming back from Melbourne, Dad says, "You were like an alien."
Yeah, in what way?
I'd been living in the city and sipping coffees at cafes and being an engineer.
You're like tippy-toeing around,
riding elevators in a suit and tie. And,
yeah.
It was a very different life. And despite I would be out kayaking or climbing something every weekend, but still living in the city, you get pretty. You
get a bit soft.
You get a bit soft. I don't want to say that. I've got a lot of mates in the city. They're pretty
I'm sure they're tough.
Tougher than me, man. But yeah, you don't. The parks, the green, the grass is green in the parks. The gardens seem to be growing.
Oh no, she's right. We're nearly there anyway.
And but yeah, so coming back to the farm, definitely I questioned everything about the farm. Why are we shear now? Why are we drenching this often? Why are we putting a fence there? Why do we have to maintain? Just all these questions. I definitely came back questioning a lot more than maybe if I'd just come straight out of school and straight onto the farm and hadn't been away and seen how the rest of the world lives. And so that was the first point. And then I guess the next major one was after I'd really well and truly taken over. Look, we did have a little comma in our life on the farm. We actually went and lived in France for a year, and that was also a very reflective time on what we were doing, both of us. Millie, her professional life, she went to IT and business intelligence, and that's so remote, so removed from the farm. So, but yeah, it was a good opportunity to get away again, and it was a good time to go. There was a mini drought that year. I remember seeing we should shear at the end of July, but we went over. One of the conditions of going over was still had caretaking place, and I had to leave after shearing, and I had to get back before shearing.
That was the year.
That was the year. So I remember seeing all the photos of the red sheep from the dust again. So dust has featured quite a bit. Again, 2013-14 was the drought wasn't as widespread, but we were just over 300 mil for the year here, but it was pretty bad. And we were seeing drying events like we hadn't seen, that my dad had never seen. So he'd heard about in my grandfather's time, but. And then, so already, and I tried to feed my way through that. And after the 80s drought, I think my parents had got into a little bit of a habit of supplementary feeding because it had become a lot easier to just get on the phone and order the grain and call the grain in and
it quickly turns into substitutional feeding.
That's right. So we were still doing that. And I hadn't questioned that maybe as much as I should have. But that drought really we can do this in the pastures. We can feed the animals full time. If the pastures, we don't need to be dribbling gold coins out the back of the ute onto the paddock. Then we gradually drifted into the 2019 drought, and I kept reducing my stock numbers. Look, there's many different strategies in getting through droughts, and I don't discount any of them. And I think they've all got their place depending on where you are in life and how your farm's set up, what your family structure is, or your staff structure, etc. But I'm just one person here running the place by myself. So if there's stock feeding to do every day, that falls on my head.
With your choice,
I managed to get through to shearing without feeding.
Yeah. So that's not your feed cut over there.
No. I won't say it.
Well, it's not yours.
There we go. Somebody's still feeding.
Someone's still feeding. And there seems to be feed on the ground.
There's a hell of a lot of feed on the ground.
Yeah.
We were doing, over a kilo a day on the cattle we got last year through winter, and I was pretty
through winter.
That.
Yeah, cool.
And that's just off pasture. So we put out a little bit of mineral supplement now to account for those deficiencies that our inputs have been chicken manure and gypsum. So we know that there has to be, if there's a certain amount of outputs, there has to be replacing those. But yeah, we managed to get through. We ended up having to feed sheep for a few months, lambing ewes, but we didn't feed cattle. We had enough water this time. We got through the water. But look, that 2019 drought just really hammered it home on how much soil's being lost if we don't manage our ground cover. And to be sitting where we are sitting today and just seeing the dust storms roll by was pretty dramatic.
It's hard to imagine looking at there now,
It's really hard to imagine just now. Yeah, really hard to imagine. But when you dig down, when you look at the diversity in the pastures now, there is plenty of measurables there. But yeah, those were my few turning points. My parents definitely gave me the tools, and my grandparents the inspiration to get to where we are now. And we know now that like I said, my parents wander around the paddock, they just can't believe what's grown out of all those trees that they planted. So we know now it's not actually that normal to establish trees and change probably dramatically. The turnaround can be done a lot quicker. It can't be done overnight, and there'll be changes ongoing 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the track. But like I said, it's a very modified landscape we're living in, so it's like a big laboratory. You're still seeing those changes and leveraging those observation skills and relying on the science to maybe explain it if it needs explaining.
Well, you're leaving a wonderful legacy here for not just your children and family, Michael, but for the world, from what I can see. Now, I reckon we might have time, if I get packed up quick enough, I'd love to, can we go somewhere, is there somewhere close that is a really good one-stop look around? Maybe your oak, is there some little oak grove or something?
There's some very nice little oak groves. We could go to the cocktail bar.
in the morning.
The cocktail bar overlooks the farm.
Yeah.
And
that's not far away.
It's not far away.
Okay. Well, maybe we do that because I'd love to not leave.
You could nearly hop up there in our one boot.
We better move it, put these socks back on. Tell you what I'll do. I'll get packed up first. We can probably have this conversation off air, can't we?
Thanks, Charlie.
Let's wrap it up. That was wonderful, Michael. Thank you so much for your time on this beautiful autumn day here. And just before my microphone falls over, yours is just hang on there. I've noticed you've actually lowered your chair so you don't have to move the mic.
I've sagged into the mic.
Looking very uncomfortable there. But that was wonderful. I hope we can do this again and have do a much better look around and visit some of your tree growing workshops that you've just promised you're going to put on.
Look, I'm very much getting my own backyard in order.
No. Look,
but we have an open gate policy here. We haven't even touched on all the wool stuff that we've been involved in, but ethically grown, ecologically grown wool is a big thing, and natural fibres. So, but we have an open gate policy for anybody that wants to come and see the place, see where our sheep live, see where our cattle live, see where we live.
Yeah.
It sometimes can be tiring, but it's very rewarding being able to share it, and it's just as it's very rewarding hearing the stories that you shared, Charlie. I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you for being part of that bunch of stories, and I enjoy doing it and it's an easy job because people like you and others and my guests, they're very generous with their time and they're generous with their experience and stories, and that's really I think it's important that other people hear that and go, okay, that I can do that. It can be done. So
I couldn't have done it without my family.
Oh, of course.
my all the mistakes my ancestors made. And,
sounds like an Academy Award acceptance speech. Well, it is. This is look at this award you've got out here. It's magic.
It's pretty rewarding.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
We've tried, like I said, we've tried living in a few different places. We keep coming back.
You've come home. That's good, and may you stay for.
There's not even a beach here.
That's right. Got a kayak in that bloody trough down there. Let's wrap it up, Michael. Lovely to chat, and I hope to see you again very soon.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Awesome.